They told me I could have anything I wanted: power, wealth, influence beyond imagination. They said I'd earned it, that all I had to do was stay quiet, let the truth die where it fell. I remember their faces, calm, rehearsed, the kind of smiles that don't reach the eyes. But something inside me wouldn't bend, because I'd already seen what waits beyond their promises. I'd already seen what God showed me. It started years ago, before the world turned gray. I was a man like any other, chasing the next step, the next success. I believed in progress, in control. I thought truth was something you could measure. But one night, while the world slept, everything I knew fractured like glass. It was quiet, too quiet, when I woke. The clock on the wall had stopped. The air was thick, humming with something unseen. And from somewhere outside, a light began to spill across the floorboards. Not the cold blue of the moon, but a living light, golden, shifting, pulsing like a heartbeat. I stepped outside, barefoot, the ground cold against my skin. The fields were glowing. Every blade of grass shimmered with light, bending toward the horizon as though bowing to something vast. I followed it, I don't know why, until I reached the old river. And that's where I saw him. He didn't look like the paintings, no halo, no perfect white robe, just a man standing knee-deep in the water, the current swirling around him but never touching. His face was calm, but his eyes were a storm, endless, ancient, knowing. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. He didn't have to tell me who he was. I knew. Every cell in my body recognized him. He raised his hand, and the light bent toward me. The sound of the river faded, the world held its breath. Then his voice, not loud, not soft, but everywhere. They are building their kingdom, he said, and they will offer you a throne among them, but their kingdom is not of light. The wind stopped. Even the stars seemed to flicker out. What must I do? I asked. He looked at me with sorrow, not anger. Speak what you see, even when they call you mad, even when they promise you everything to stay silent. The vision faded. I fell to my knees in the mud, shaking. The light was gone, replaced by the weight of silence. And yet I felt something burning inside me, not fear, not madness, but a truth too heavy for words. The next morning I wrote down everything I remembered, every image, every sound. The words came like fire, spilling from my hands faster than I could think. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew they weren't mine. That's when they came at first. It was curiosity, reporters, church leaders, people who wanted to help. They called it divine inspiration, a gift. But soon others came, men in black suits who didn't give their names, who asked where I'd been that night, what I'd seen, who I'd spoken to. They weren't curious. They were afraid. They said they worked for a private organization, Guardians of Stability. They called themselves. They told me I had something dangerous, something the world wasn't ready for. They offered me safety, influence, money, if I'd just hand over the journals and forget what happened. But how do you forget the voice of God? I refused. That's when the quiet war began. It started small. My friends stopped returning calls, my accounts froze, my address disappeared from public records. People who had once believed me now crossed the street to avoid my eyes. The world around me began to erase me, one detail at a time. Then came the dreams. I'd wake to whispers at the edge of hearing, to shapes in the dark that disappeared when I turned on the light. Once I found a mark carved into my front door, a circle with an eye in the center. Beneath it, the words, "You were warned." But I couldn't stop, because every night the visions grew stronger. I saw cities burning not from fire, but from silence. I saw towers of glass and steel crumble without sound. I saw people walking like shadows, eyes hollow, souls emptied by the promise of progress. And above them, something vast, something that looked like light but wasn't, stretching across the sky. I understood then what he'd meant. The kingdom they were building wasn't made of stone. It was made of control. Words were written, memories replaced, faith reduced to noise. They offered me the world again, a seat at their table, a voice among their architects. They said I could help shape the new order, that I could guide it from within. All I had to do was rewrite what he showed me, turn his message into something safe, something profitable. I remember the night they brought me to their facility. It was deep underground, beneath a city that no longer sleeps. The walls were white, the air sterile. Screens covered every surface, filled with symbols that pulsed like veins. A man greeted me there, no name, no title. Just a smile too calm to be human. "You've seen the pattern," he said. "You've glimpsed what we're creating. Don't fight it. We're not destroying faith. We're perfecting it." He led me to a room where people sat in rows, staring at glowing walls. Their faces were blank, their mouths slightly open. They're connected, he said proudly. Every thought, every prayer, every belief filtered and aligned. I wanted to scream, but then he leaned close, his breath cold against my ear. "Join us," he whispered, "or be forgotten." That's when I realized the truth. They didn't just want silence. They wanted to replace the voice. I ran that night. I don't know how I made it out, only that the alarms never sounded. Maybe he was watching. Maybe they let me go, knowing no one would believe me. I hid for months, moving from one forgotten town to another, writing what I'd seen in codes, symbols, anything to keep it alive. The world outside was changing faster than ever, faces glowing in the light of their devices, speaking in words that meant nothing. I saw the same symbols from that facility appearing everywhere in logos, on billboards, hidden in plain sight. And then the messages started appearing again, not from them, from him. They'd come in dreams, sometimes as light, sometimes as sound, always the same words. "The time will come when silence becomes the language of truth. Speak then." I knew what he meant. The storm wasn't coming, it was already here. People ask why I didn't take what they offered, why I chose exile over comfort. But how do you accept a world built on forgetting? How do you trade the voice of the divine for a seat in a machine that devours souls? They think they've won. They think the message is buried, but it isn't. It's written in every quiet heart that still feels the pull of something higher. It's whispered in the spaces between their noise. I gave up everything, my name, my life, the world they promised to deliver, what he showed me. And I would do it again, because the message wasn't meant to make me powerful. It was meant to remind you. He said the final war would not be fought with weapons, but with truth. That those who listen, who refuse to forget, will be the last light standing when the false dawn rises. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the hum. I still see the glow on the horizon. I don't know how long I'll last before they find me again, but I'm not afraid anymore, because I remember. And as long as I remember, as long as even one of us does, their silence will never win. I remember the night after I sent out the last message. The air was heavy, not from weather, but from something unseen, like the sky itself was waiting. I had just finished writing the final words when the lights in the house flickered once, twice, and then went black. Silence filled the room, deep and suffocating. Even the insects outside had stopped their chorus. It felt as if the world was holding its breath, as if something was about to begin. I sat there in the dark for a long time, listening. Then I heard it, that low hum again, faint at first, like a vibration in the bones, not the air. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. I stepped toward the window, heart pounding, and saw them, 3 black vehicles, parked down the road, lights off, silhouettes just barely visible beneath the faint glow of the moon. I knew who they were. They'd found me again. I grabbed my coat, the old leather one I'd kept since before this all began, and the journal, the only copy of the message left in my handwriting. Everything else had already been destroyed. I slipped out the back door into the cold. The forest behind the cabin was dense, a labyrinth of branches and shadows. I moved quietly, following the path by memory. The hum grew louder as I walked, echoing through the trees, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. When I reached the ridge, I looked back. The vehicle's doors had opened. Figures stepped out, no flashlights, no voices, just movement. They spread out, methodical, like they knew exactly where I'd go. I started running. My breath came out in white bursts, mixing with the mist. Branches whipped my face. I didn't stop until I reached the clearing, the same place where he'd first appeared to me, years ago. And there it was again, the light, faint at first, like the shimmer of heat on metal, then brighter, filling the clearing, bending the air itself. I fell to my knees, the journal clutched to my chest. I didn't say a word, but he spoke anyway. "You were not meant to hide," he said. The voice was the same calm, deep, infinite. "You were meant to bear witness." I looked up through the light. "They're coming for me." I whispered, "They won't stop. They can't stop what has already begun." He said, "The world is shifting, not by their hand, but by their blindness. They built a kingdom of mirrors, and now they no longer see their own faces." The ground trembled. I saw visions again, flashes of the world beyond now. Cities pulsing with artificial light, people walking in silence, their eyes lit with screens that showed them everything but truth. I saw leaders speaking to empty crowds, their words hollow, their promises rehearsed. And above it all, that same false light aglow without warmth, spreading across the sky like a second sun. "They think they control the message," he continued, "but they do not understand truth is not owned. It burns through lies like fire through paper. Even silence cannot bury it." Then the light faded, leaving only the sound of my breath and the distant hum growing closer. I stood, wiping the dirt from my hands. What do? I asked the empty air. No answer, just wind through the trees. I turned and began to move again, deeper into the forest toward the old railway line. The rails hadn't been used in decades, but I knew they led to the river and across the river, to the town where I might still find someone who believed. The night stretched endlessly. Every rustle in the brush felt like a whisper. At times I thought I saw shapes moving between the trees, not the men from the vehicles, but something else. Shadows that walked with purpose. Watching, not hunting, it felt like the whole forest was alive with unseen eyes. By dawn I reached the river. Mist hung low over the water, curling like breath. I knelt by the bank, washing the dirt and blood from my hands. My reflection looked older than I remembered, hollow eyes, unshaven, streaks of gray in my hair. But there was something else, two faint lines of light, running beneath the skin of my arms, like veins glowing softly from within. I touched them. They pulsed once, then faded. I didn't understand it then. I still don't, but I knew it meant he wasn't gone. Not yet. That afternoon I found shelter in an abandoned chapel at the edge of town. The door was half off its hinges, the pews rotting, the altar covered in dust. Yet as I stepped inside, I felt a strange calm, a silence different from fear. On the back wall, a mural still clung to the stone. Christ with outstretched arms, the paint cracked and faded. But his eyes were clear. I set the journal on the altar and began to write again. My hands shook as I did. I wrote everything, what I'd seen, what he'd said, the war that had already begun. I wrote of the false light, the hollow faith, the silence that was spreading like disease, and as I wrote, I began to hear footsteps outside, slow, heavy, measured. I blew out the candle, pressed myself against the wall. The door creaked open. A beam of light swept across the room, the kind from tactical flashlights, sharp and white. "Come out." A voice said, calm, emotionless, "We know you're here." I didn't move. "We don't want to hurt you." Another voice said, softer, "You have something that doesn't belong to you." I gripped the journal tighter. My heart pounded, and then silence. Seconds passed, minutes. I heard them whisper to each other. Then the first voice spoke again, closer now, just beyond the pews. "You think he speaks to you," he said quietly. "You think you've seen God. You've seen what we've made. You've seen our creation." My blood went cold. "We built the visions," he said. "We wrote the messages. You're just another vessel, another experiment that got out of hand." He stepped into view. His face was pale, sharp, too still, like a wax figure that had learned to move. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the flashlight's beam. "Not natural light, something else. You're lying," I said. He smiled. "Am I?" He reached out a hand. "Give me the book. You've carried it long enough." I backed away toward the altar. "You don't understand," I said. He showed me what's coming. "We showed you," he interrupted. "Every word, every image. We fed you what you wanted to believe. Faith is the easiest illusion of all." For a moment I almost believed him, almost, but then the air shifted a faint warmth, like the sun cutting through a storm. And behind him I saw the mural, the painted eyes of Christ glowing, alive. The man turned to look, and in that instant the candles on the altar ignited on their own. Flames rose, fierce and soundless. His face twisted, the calm gone, replaced by something like fear. I heard the voice again, his voice deep and steady. "They can imitate the light, but they cannot bear it." The man screamed, not in pain, but in rage, and rushed toward me. I threw the journal into the fire. The flames rose higher, white now, blinding. I don't remember what happened after that. Only light and silence. When I woke, the chapel was gone. Only ash remained. The journal was gone too, or maybe it wasn't. I felt something in my chest, a heaviness, a warmth that pulsed with every heartbeat. I walked for days after that, through ruined roads and empty town. People looked different now, distracted, hollow. The glow from their devices had changed. It was softer, slower, almost like it was breathing with them. They didn't speak any more. They just stared. The world was slipping, not collapsing, not burning, dissolving, like color fading from an old photograph. I realized then what he'd meant when he said I wasn't meant to hide. The message wasn't in the book anymore. It was in me, written under the skin. I began to speak again, not in churches or streets, but quietly to whoever would listen, in bus stations, on trains, to strangers who still had questions in their eyes. Some walked away. Some cried. A few followed me. They said they'd seen it too, the light, the shadow, the silence creeping closer each day. We became wanderers, messengers, ghosts, but they never stopped hunting us. The men in black, the ones who said they built the visions, they spread faster than before. They moved like a network of whispers, rewriting every record, every word. Soon people couldn't even remember what the world was like before. History became a product, memory a subscription, and yet, in the smallest corners of the earth, the message still burned. I saw it in the eyes of a child who handed her last piece of bread to a stranger, in an old woman who still lit a candle each night, even when there was no electricity left to power the world outside, in the man who stood in silence amid chaos, refusing to bow to the false light. They were still out there, the ones who remembered. I sometimes wonder if he knew it would come to this, if he knew the message would cost everything. The world has changed. The cities are louder now, yet somehow emptier. The sky feels closer, heavier, as if waiting for something to break. And still I hear his voice, fainter now, but still there. "Do not be afraid." He whispers, "They can erase your name, but not your purpose. I've lost everything, everyone, but I've kept the truth, and maybe that's enough, because I've seen what's coming, the last chapter of this illusion. It won't end in fire or flood. It will end in a single moment of clarity, when the false light flickers out and the world finally realizes how dark it has become. And in that moment, the ones who still carry the flame, those who refused to bow, who chose truth over comfort, love over fear, they will rise, quietly, unseen. I don't know if I'll live to see it, but I know it's real, because even now, when I close my eyes, I see the river again, the man standing in the current, the light bending around him. He never left, he was waiting, watching, preparing. And when the time comes, when the final silence falls, he will speak again, not in thunder, not in fire, but in truth, and the world will remember what it tried so hard to forget.